I wanted to make this video about Angela Nagle's Kill All Normies. It's a little late to the party, obviously, because it was published back in 2017. But there's been some recent spats that have been popping up all over the internet, especially on Twitter, with regard to Angela Nagle herself. And so I thought, and the book itself as well. And I want to kind of like point out a couple things here. I'm only halfway through it, just this afternoon. I am a fast reader, and it's a very small book. It's about 120 pages, which I think is one of the downsides to the book because of the fact that it is so information dense, that it requires you to know a lot about what 4chan is, about who, what Tumblr is about, and who are all these other figures. Even though she sometimes will explain, there's a lot of other things she kind of leaves up in the air. And essentially, it's almost as if she expects you to read a lot of other sources. And she doesn't give a lot of sources either. I don't think anything at all, really, to give you a comprehensive grounding or primer somewhere to start with. And so that's a bad thing, I think, about this book. That information density is just... this is a book that really, in my opinion, should be at least about 400, maybe even 500, 600 pages long. I know people are like, oh my god, that's a big book. But if you think about the subject matter of talking about like a so-called modern culture war between supposedly just 4chan and Tumblr, liberalism so-called, which I don't know why she came up with that term. She should have just copied the term for 4chan of Tumblerinas. It would have been better because it would have been more authentic. I know she wants to pretend to be abstract and intellectual about this, but there's not much that's abstract about this phenomenon as she wants to pretend there is. And that kind of gets to my second point, which is that her reading of 4chan, of internet history, Tumblr, and numerous other online communities is grossly simplified to such an extreme that I don't know if she is a person that has regularly visited those kinds of sites or has ever in her younger years, I don't know how old she is, ever been part of those sites. Like, I mean, I'm 38 years old, mind you, so I guess in terms of like internet history, I'm getting up there, right? I'm not certainly far up there like some people I know, but I'm getting up there. I'm not no Vint Cerf that literally was there and created the very beginning of it, but I'm getting up there. And especially in terms of pre-.com, bubble burst, I remember a lot of that stuff. And I lived a lot of that stuff. So it's like, hey, I recall that. You know, it's like going down memory lane. And yes, my memory is not all that good. I mean, no human memory is. But I definitely do not read and remember 4chan the way she does, or tries to regurgitate through other sources which she doesn't seem to really cite very well, if at all. And that's kind of a bad sign, in my opinion, because non-technical people or non-internet kind of denizens writing about internet history is kind of a bad thing, in my opinion, because it comes with its own kind of misreading and misinterpretation, because it's almost like going to a foreign country. It's like being, say, a historian of Chinese history, and you don't know how to read Mandarin, or not Mandarin, but speak Mandarin and read Chinese. Sorry. There's my fucking white ass being dumb. You know? But nonetheless, point being is that kind of being a foreigner and not having a grounding as to what the culture and society that you're going to address is a big penalty and deficiency for which she does not overcome in the book. And she has a very narrow reading of what 4chan and Poll and all those people are about. She has an extremely narrow reading of what Tumblr is all about as a website and as a user base, which it's not solely about non-binary genders. It's not just solely about slut walks. It's not solely about identity politics or slacktivism. A good chunk of Tumblr is porn, art, fandom, even music. Even some of its history. Believe it or not, you know, Tumblr is pretty diverse, just like 4chan is. And 4chan is very old in relative terms of like online institutions. One that's endured even compared to, say, like YTMND, or MySpace, or LiveJournal, or eBaum's World. God, I'm feeling old. Or even Something Awful. Like, literally, Goon Swarm on EVE Online is largely not an essay organization anymore. It doesn't have a lot of people from the Something Awful forums. People got bored and left EVE. All there is, I think, and I don't even think Matani was ever truly part of those kinds of forums himself. I may have to double check. I don't think he was, but I'll double check. Maybe later, and I'll reference it maybe in the description for this video. But essentially, the book is very poor in terms of its reading of history by its author. It's very poor in terms of interpretation of what's going on the internet. Like, for example, she blames identity politics of supposedly of the Tumblr left or liberals, Tumblr liberalism for 4chan's retaliation against Tumblr, not realizing the big reason why 4chan goes after Tumblr, by the way, is the same reason why it's after the likes of Fur Infinity and furries in general as a subculture, gone after places like Club Penguin, places such as DeviantArt as well, and numerous other places, even Second Life, which I was also part of for 10 years, since 2007. Yeah, been on there a lot of wasted time there. But long story short, I guess I'm trying to make here is that 4chan, especially with B and their ops, prior to things like Chanology and even after Chanology, when it came to online communities and rivalries and fights, it is predominantly centered around the fact that it does not treat being online with the same kind of earnestness, authenticity, and openness to be vulnerable. In fact, much of B kind of subculture is about mockery of those things. And ironically, she kind of reads it as being nihilism, and perhaps it is, but I think it's more to be more properly read as cynicism about the world. That it's giving up on being authentic and human. But yet, nonetheless, we see, and she even admits through some references of history, that B or Anon can be very kind to people. That randomness does exist sometimes with a thumb on the scale towards goodness sometimes, right? Not towards just badness and being cruel. But she kind of reads it as like, oh, right-wing reaction. When it's not a right-wing reaction, it's just people taking to the pseudo-anonymous nature of the internet and both taking advantage of it for cruelty and sometimes, kindness and being a random Samaritan to never ever be known and to perhaps be remembered, but not for who they are, but what they did. Kind of an odd little situation if you think about it. And the reason why then B goes after sites like Tumblr is because people attach their identity to it and are honest and are vulnerable and are willing to go on a limb. And that doesn't mean that Tumblr is a kinder place either because of that. I would say it's more cruel than 4chan. But that's just my opinion. I could go into that, but this video is getting too long. So in short, I really cannot recommend this book because of the fact that it doesn't do a good job explaining itself. And worse still, it does a terrible job of essentially regurgitating the history, a very winding, labyrinthian history of 4chan, and a complete poor misreading of Tumblr. It's just simply just not worth the $7 I bought it. Even though it's 120 pages, it's just not worth it. If she comes out with a second edition, gets some interviews from people, actually expands on it, providing sources and materials, and actually tries to kind of make a miniature history, then maybe I'll reread it. I'm definitely going to finish it up, but as I see so far, I don't see any way for her argument to stand up on to an examination just simply on the fact that she gets the facts wrong and doesn't understand 4chan much the way that old farts don't understand the internet. Sorry, it's just the way I read it.